From Minnesota to Illinois to Kansas City to British Columbia, the left has a violence problem, and we are here to unpack it today on The Nathan Hale Show. Well, folks, it is that time of week again. It is Friday, February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to all of you who celebrate. We are back with another episode, as we are every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope you all are sat down, get yourself a snack, get yourself a nice drink of water, something to have with you while we unpack what has been going on this week. You know, my intention for this show today was to have a nice variety of stories to go over, but when I tell you that I looked at what was happening in the news this week, and it was kind of a big nothing burger besides a few specific stories, I decided to really hone in this show on a few things that I had seen kind of pop up and turn this into kind of half it looking at a couple other stories in the other half, which we're going to start with, really focusing on some of the violence that we're seeing in the United States right now coming from the left, from people who have been radicalized by ICE to go out and commit crimes, to go in and protesting in churches, to the amount of mental illness that is running rampant among our younger generations in America. We have a lot to talk about, and I've kind of geared the show today to focus on that. So I hope you're tucked in. Hope you got a snack. Hope you're ready to hang out with me for a little bit. So without further ado, let's go and jump right into it. So our very first story, this comes out of Minnesota. So we have an update on the Don Lemon Minnesota church protest. So ex-CNN host Don Lemon, yeah, that's right, ex-host, because remember, he got fired, set to be arraigned in Minnesota church protest case. So former CNN host turned independent journalist, I'm not sure if we can really call him an independent journalist, but all right, that's a stretch, Don Lemon is set to be arraigned in federal court in Minnesota on Friday, along with 4 other defendants who were indicted for their alleged roles in disrupting a service at church where an immigration customs enforcement official was a pastor. Allegedly. I'm not even sure if this has been confirmed or not, if he was actually with ICE is the thing. Right? This was the whole thing, is there was this huge protest that erupted inside this church because allegedly this pastor was a part of immigration customs enforcement. I'm not even sure if he actually was or not. I haven't heard either way. If you all have, if it's been confirmed or not, let me know. But I haven't heard either way. So also scheduled for Arraignment Friday is civil rights attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong, the subject of a photo posted on an official White House social media account that was altered to falsely show her crying when she was arrested. Now, just an aside, folks. I don't know. Someone needs to rein the interns in at the White House. Because here's the thing. Some things they post is genuinely funny. And I'm like, let's have some more of this. But when we start posting digitally altered AI photographs from official government accounts, I question, what are we doing here, right? Someone needs to rein in the interns. Because that's who's posting things, the interns, right? It's got to be the interns. Rein the interns in, guys. I don't like that kind of stuff. Just post the real things. It's so ridiculous and outlandish that this happened in the first place. We don't need to go and post AI photographs to further prove that point. So the picture is part of an AI altered imagery circulating since the fatal shooting of Renee Good and Alex Peretti by federal officers in Minneapolis amid the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. So arraignments in federal court typically include the entering of pleas and scheduling of future proceedings. Lemon had previously said, through another attorney, Marilyn Bednask, that he planned to plead not guilty to federal civil rights charges over his coverage of the protest at the Southern Baptist Church of St. Paul. Of course he's not going to plead guilty to it, right? Of course he's not. Of course he's going to fight it. So protesters interrupted the service at City's Church on January 18th chanting "Ice Out" and "Justice for Renee Good," referring to the 37-year-old mother of 3 who was fatally shot by an ICE officer in Minneapolis last month. Quote, "I have spent my entire career covering the news. I will not stop now. In fact, there is no more important time than right now, this very moment, for a free and independent media that shines a light on the truth and holds those in power accountable," Lemon told reporters after his arrest. Who are we holding accountable here, though, right? It's not like the pastor of the church went and shot someone. We don't even know if he was actually part of ICE. And by the way, holding people accountable does not mean that you can just walk into a church and start screaming at people. Just like you can't just walk into an abortion clinic and start screaming at people. That's not how we do things in America, right? We don't do things like that here. If you really want to make an impact, go and have a march in Washington, D.C. Go and protest in front of the White House, right? You don't go into some church in Minnesota and start screaming at people, right? So the charge that, or the law that Lemon is being prosecuted under is the 1994 Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, the FACE Act, which prohibits interference or intimidation of any person by force, threat, or force. Any person by force, threat of force, or physical obstruction exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right to religious freedom at a place of worship. So penalties can range up to a year in prison, up to a $10,000 fine. Now, I don't think that Don Lemon needs to be thrown in jail. I don't think he needs to be jailed. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to have a fine from these people. Something needs to be done that starts to hammer home that we have law and order in the United States, and you can't just go and do things like this, right? Same thing with all the other violence issues we're going to talk about later today. This is certainly one of them, in that these people need to be held accountable and understand that when they go and commit crimes, there's going to be consequences for them. And they're not just going to get away with it, right? We've had that for far too long in America, where the left has gone and committed crimes and just gotten away with it. And frankly, it's still kind of happening now on both sides of the aisle, right? I've seen people who have committed crimes who Donald Trump is pardoning. I didn't decide to cover those full stories on them. I don't have all the facts for those, but it concerns me when I see that we're just pardoning people who have committed some sort of crime and they're not allowed to be held accountable for that. There's no reason to be pardoning them. Same thing in this case, right? These people need to be held accountable for going and protesting inside a church. If you committed a crime, you need to do the time, and you need to be held accountable for doing that. That's how we run our country in America. It's shameful that we've even gotten to this point. So this story, this was kind of an update on a previous story that happened. This kind of rolls nicely into our next story, which has to do with the amount of mental illness that we have in the United States right now, and even in the westernized world, by the fact that we're having shootings happening at schools. So there was yet another school shooting that happened. So a transgender ex-student identified as alleged suspect in Canadian school mass shooting that left at least 9 dead. So by the way, I just like to point out, Fox News is the only news org that is reporting in the headline, from what I can tell, this was a transgender individual, right? This is not just another school shooting, right? So we're going to get into this. Let's read the story first and then we'll unpack. So at least 9 people were killed in connection to a mass shooting Tuesday at Tumblr Ridge Secondary School in British Columbia, officials said Wednesday. Police identified the suspect, reportedly also found dead, as an 18-year-old transgender woman who allegedly killed 2 of their family members at home before opening fire at the school. The Tumblr Ridge Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, what a name for a police force, by the way. You don't see that in America. Confirmed to Fox News Digital that officers responded to reports of an active shooter at the school at 1:20 p.m. local time Tuesday. While searching the school, officers found 6 victims dead from gunshot wounds, and the alleged shooter identified as 18-year-old Jess Van Rootselaar dead from what appeared to be a self-inflicted injury. Authorities said Van Rootselaar had attended the school before dropping out roughly 4 years ago. 4 years ago, right? This isn't a recent attendance, right? Van Rootselaar, who was born male but identified as female, began transitioning 6 years ago. Wow, 6 years, really? All right. So, 2 years before they dropped out. Van Rootselaar reportedly had a history of mental health related contact with police and may have had access to weapons stored at home. Police said officers visited the residence multiple times in recent years for mental health calls, during which weapons were briefly seized under the criminal code but later returned following a petition by the lawful owner. 2 firearms, a long gun and a modified handgun, were recovered inside the school by the police, RCMP said. Neither weapon was registered to Van Rootselaar, who previously had a firearms license but expired in 2024. The 6 victims found at the school were identified as a 39-year-old female educator, 3 12-year-old female students, and 2 male students aged 12 and 13. During the investigation, police identified a second location believed to be connected to the incident. 2 additional victims were found dead inside a residence and were identified as the suspect's 39-year-old mother and 11-year-old stepbrother. It's so unfortunate whenever situations like this happen. And, say a prayer for these families tonight who lost children because of this, or you may have already, considering this happened a couple days ago. But we need to have a serious conversation in America when it comes to the amount of mental illness running rampant among our populations. And I recognize this happened in Canada, but really it's North America in general. And frankly, you can throw Europe into this as well. I don't know how this really is in other countries, but at least it seems like in westernized countries, there's a lot of mental illness running around right now. And here's the thing. I don't believe that being transgender necessarily makes you want to go and shoot a school up, but I do believe that if you feel like you were born into the wrong body, you have some form of mental illness. And mentally ill people are who goes and commits crimes, right? Sane people like you and I, the normal people watching this show, we don't go and commit crimes. We don't do stuff like that because we're rational human beings who realize that we don't need to express our feelings through the bullet of a gun into children, right? We don't need to do that, right? We're rational, normal people. So not that only transgender people are going and shooting schools up or committing crimes, but we're certainly seeing an increased amount of these happening within the past year or two. We can look at numerous examples to point that out. I feel like we've talked about these stories on past shows as well, but you can go and look them up. We find case after case after case of transgender individuals going and shooting people. The individual who went and shot Charlie Kirk, assassinated Charlie Kirk, a transgender person, or at least someone who was on the gender spectrum, right? Wasn't there a case where it was alleged that the individual who went and shot Trump in the ear was also on the trans spectrum of gender, whatever that means, right? So we're certainly seeing an increase of this, and we need to have a conversation that has to do with the mental health of these people. And the left has for years tried to snuff the idea that if you are born in the wrong body, you somehow have a mental illness, right? They're like, it's a totally normal thing. It's just how people feel on the inside, right? It's just the same thing how people feel on the inside. It's whatever they say. It's how they feel on the inside, right? And they've used that to justify cutting bodies off, justified not bringing it up when it has to do with crimes that are being committed, and just kind of sweep it under the rug, right? They would like to make you believe that the transgender and the crime have nothing to do with each other. They're not at all correlated. They're not related whatsoever. When in reality, people who are rational realize that they are in fact correlated. This was a mentally ill person who went and committed a crime out of school. I don't think that anyone who commits crimes is not mentally ill, right? There had to have been some part of your brain that thought for some reason committing a crime was okay. And that goes for any crimes, right? Because we as normal people, we as rational people know not to commit crimes, right? It's not hard to follow laws, right? And we saw that too with the Don Lemon case, right? We see these people going and protesting inside a church. You have to be kind of mentally ill to go and do something like that. I'm sorry. I mean, you just have to be. You're going and interrupting a church service in the middle of the day. The vast majority of people at that church don't even know that this guy allegedly might be a part of an ICE operation, right? They don't know what's going on. You don't even know if the people in the church voted for Trump or not, and yet you're going and interrupting their church service. That could have been a church service filled with Democrats for all we know. We have no idea, right? We have no idea. So it's the same thing here, where we have people going and shooting schools who are trans like this, and they're just getting away with it. And we need to have a serious conversation amongst our political leaders that this is a bad thing that's happening, and we need to have a serious investigation into the mental illness of these people and what needs to be done about it. There was a part in this article that speaks about how this individual had previous run-ins with the police, and it seems like there were guns just available inside the house. If you are a parent of someone who you know is mentally ill, who you know is dealing with issues like this, you can't just have guns accessible to them for this exact reason. And I know that is a hard thing to say, but if I knew that my child had previous run-ins with the police, you better gosh darn know I wouldn't just have guns accessible to them, right? And I know it's a hard thing to come by, to think of your child going and committing a crime using a gun like that, but you have to play it safe, right? If you're not willing to get your child help, and clearly these parents weren't considering that this individual been transitioning for 6 years at this point, clearly they're not interested in getting help, you have to be reasonable and know that this is something that could happen, that you need to keep your guns locked up. You need to do that anyways. You shouldn't just have guns available to people lying around your house. So, but certainly not when you know you have a mentally ill child living in that house. But the outcry from the progressives, the outcry from the Democrats, the outcry from the liberals in Canada has been non-existent over this. And it's being looked at as, it's just another school shooting that happened, right? The guns are the issue. This is our opportunity to get more gun control in Canada, right? The guns are not the issue here. Guns don't go commit crimes. Someone has to pull the trigger of that gun. The person pulling the trigger, I would say, is almost always a mentally ill individual. So we need to stop the problem at the root, figure out what are we going to do when we have people coming in, when we have people saying that they are transgender. What are we going to do about that, right? Are we just going to go along with their delusions and allow them to believe even further that they are in fact another gender? Or are we going to sit them down and say, you're not another gender, right? You can't transition bodies. Your biology is your biology. You're either XX or XY. And whatever that is, whatever your biological cells say, that's what you are. It doesn't matter how you feel on the inside, how you feel inside your brain, right? That's how you are. And we need to have serious treatment for people who feel that way and not just affirming how they feel, right? So this kind of rolls into the next thing that I saw. We're going to kind of jump back to ICE now. So there's been a lot of outrage over ICE in the United States trying to do their job and carry out federal law that has been on the books for years, by the way, to the point that there are protests happening, even protests happening inside of schools. So one of those protests happened in Lake Zurich, Illinois. And an individual by the username Danny Spud posted a video, a TikTok of himself inside his high school. And he tweeted, quote, "Today, students at my high school in Chicago held an anti-ICE protest. I was the only one that decided to hold a sign that said, 'I love ICE.' Instead of allowing me to express my opinion, I was assaulted just for standing up for law enforcement. What is happening in America?" So let's take a look at this video and try and see what's going on with this.
We support ICE and law enforcement. I support ICE.
That's crazy, bro.
I don't know what's crazy about this.
Yeah, I'm going to punch you.
You're gonna punch me?
Yes.
And you're gonna get in trouble for that.
Okay.
Whoa. Chill out, bro. I stand for my beliefs. I'm gonna peacefully stand here and support my beliefs. I support ICE and law enforcement.
Peacefully fuck yourself.
Whoa. That's against school code. No swearing in the school.
They're on their way there right now. We also have students walking out of the building as well, starting their protest.
I support ICE and law enforcement. Am I allowed to stand here?
You are allowed to.
Okay. I'm allowed to have this sign too,
You're
like everyone
allowed
else?
to have
Okay.
be part of the protest. In a
I just stand
moment.
for my beliefs, you know, like this is okay. We
So
support
we
ICE
can
and
see
law
that
enforcement.
These are children who are participating in a protest. Now, I'm not going to sit here and allege that this individual, Danny Spud, knows anything about what is going on in the world any more than the other kids participating in a protest at the school. But the point still stands. This guy showed up with an I Love ICE sign. And how is he treated? He gets punched right in front of everyone, right? Not even in the back alleyway, not even down a quiet street, literally in front of this entire group of people. And nobody does anything about it other than these couple of security guards that are here. And that's it, right? Nothing from the protesters. I'm sorry. If I was participating in a protest and if I was participating in a protest and an individual got socked right in front of me, I'd be like, all right, guys, all right, let's chill out for a second. What the heck is going on here that we're having people getting punched, right? This is not okay. I don't care who you are who's getting punched. I would be equally as upset if this was the other way around and these were individuals protesting for their Turning Point chapter inside their high school, and they punched a progressive who was saying, some nasty things to them, right? It's equally as bad no matter which way it goes. This is so ridiculous. These are children, guys. These are literal children. And they have gotten to the point where they think it's okay to punch someone. Just like that, right? Just like that inside their school. Right in front of everyone. It's just astonishing to me that we think that that is okay. And where is the outrage from the left because of this, right? This is not a grown adult, right? This is not someone who is just out in the world. This is a high school student who is going and punching someone because they disagree with them, right? We've known that bullying has been an issue in high schools for quite a while in America, right? But this is not even bullying. This is just outright assault, right? This is just a kid going and punching someone because they don't like the sign that they have on them, right? Can you imagine the outrage by the left if this was the other way around and a conservative went and punched one of these people protesting? This guy, the only person there who appears to be on the pro-immigration custom enforcement side, not making a racket, standing off to the side. It's not like he's trying to intimidate the other protesters there. It's not like he showed up with 50 people, right, to intimidate the other side or anything. He's literally one guy. If anyone should feel intimidated, it should be him, considering he's the only guy there going up against at least 20 or 30 other children, by the way, at this high school. So the left has a violence problem. It's just as simple as that. They have a violence problem, and we're not hearing that from anyone, right? They have a violence problem when it comes to assault. They have a violence problem when it comes to the mental illness that is so large in their sect, right? They've really just enveloped the entire mentally ill crowd, right into them. And not that the right doesn't have their own mentally ill people, they certainly do. But your mentally ill people on the left, guys, they go hard, right? Ours are just like anti-gay marriage, right? Ours are just like kind of like crazy religious folks. Ours are like Candace Owens, like spreading conspiracy theories. Like yours are actually going out and assaulting people and shooting people. And as we're going to see in this next video, burning facilities. So a woman tried to torch a warehouse after ICE detention facility sale canceled, police say. So in Kansas City, Missouri, this woman went and sprayed some liquid onto this warehouse that an ICE facility was going to be at, but it never even went through. So police are hunting for a woman who tried to burn down a warehouse after its ICE facility sale fell through. Didn't even go through, guys, right? We're literally panicking about nothing here. Also, I love the idea that I love the fact that she thought that tiny little fire was going to do anything. Like she fully showed up to a warehouse with a single bottle of, what was that, fire starter, and thought she was going to do some real damage here, right? These liberal white women, they need to be stopped. They need to be stopped. They're a whole nother level of crazy. I also want to know who this person was who was filming this whole thing, by the way. I want to get their story. Why were they even there? So the Kansas City Police Department says officers were called to a fire at 5:50 p.m. on Thursday, February 12th. Excuse me, wrong video. Pull up this video again. We gotta keep this woman up here. All right. At 5:50 p.m. on Thursday, February 12th, the warehouse is the same property Platform Ventures attempted to sell to the federal government to use as an ICE detention facility. Early Thursday, the company announced it would not move forward with the sale. When officers arrived, they say the Kansas City Fire Department told them the building appeared to have been intentionally burned. Witnesses reported that an unknown woman approached the building and appeared to spray something before starting it on fire. KCFD Fire Department indicates that the fire was extinguished before it spread. No one was injured. KCPD says bomb and arson detectives are conducting an arson investigation. As of 8:50 p.m. on Thursday, the suspect remains at large. More mental illness right here, guys. More mental illness. If you're going to sit here and honestly tell me this woman does not have mental illness issues by the fact that she went and literally tried to start a building on fire, I'm not going to take you seriously. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not going to take you seriously. I'm not going to take you seriously. This is mental illness. The left has a violence problem that I believe is being perpetuated by the amount of mental illness seen by their side. And folks, there are normal libs out there, right? I can vibe with the normal libs, right? If you look at something like this and say that this is unacceptable, I can vibe with you, right? We're a show for normal people here. I don't care who you are. As long as you think that this is ridiculous, we can be friends, right? I don't care if you want to go and vote for a Democrat or not. I don't have any issue with that. You know, it's just thinking that stuff like this is okay and being silent when it happens that really gets on my nerves. Because here's the thing. If it was the other way around, once again, it would totally be nationwide news, right? I had to go hunting for this story. This was not coming out of any major news outlets from what I could tell as of this morning while I was finding these stories. It just blows my mind. It just blows my mind because it's so easy to just be against stuff like this. It's so easy to just say that that's not okay, that we can't be doing stuff like this. And it blows my mind that we really have seen no change, right? Charlie Kirk was shot, and I thought we were going to have this big revival in America where we just recognize that we need to lower the temperature. It is not that serious. Things that Charlie Kirk said, they're not that serious. Not worth shooting someone over. What ICE is doing, it's not that serious, guys. It's not worth going and burning a building down over it and being thrown in prison for arson. It's never that serious, right? It's never that serious. But these people believe it's that serious because they're a little mentally ill and they're just catching on to whatever it is the media is churning out to them and getting on the bandwagon of it. It's never that serious, guys. So when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, I thought that we were going to have a nationwide kind of consensus of, whoa, this has really gotten out of hand. We need to lower the temperature. And maybe we had a consensus on that for, I don't know, a day, maybe 2, maybe 3, possibly. But where's that gone to, right? I've seen nothing from this, right? The only amount of retribution we've seen from the Charlie Kirk assassination was the guy who shot him is in a court case right now because of it, to be potentially thrown in jail, right? And that hasn't even ended yet. It's still ongoing. What else have we seen? We've seen no new laws passed. We have seen the media just continue to spread what they were spreading, right? No, it seems like nobody in the media caught on to the fact that they're helping to perpetuate these issues, and they're just continuing along with it. Blows my mind, right? It's so easy for these politicians to say, folks, we understand that you're upset. You going and burning down buildings, it's not the answer. It's not going to solve anything. You all going and protesting inside church, it's not going to solve anything, right? You all, going and punching someone at a school, not going to solve anything, right? Y'all going and wanting to commit violence and get in people's face, it's not going to solve anything, right? Think of how much better off our country would be if our politicians were saying, hey, we know you're upset. We want you to call up your representatives. We want you to show up in D.C. and protest there, and protest peacefully there, and not go burning things down, right? What is the left's obsession with burning buildings down, right? It's happened in Minnesota during the BLM protests. It's happening now, right? They're obsessed with burning things down. It happened in Seattle and Portland, right? We're burning things down everywhere, right? We're obsessed with burning things down. And I think it's truly sad that we've seen nothing come from this, right? Donald Trump was shot, right? He was almost killed, the front runner for the presidential election, right? Can you imagine had he actually gotten shot? Can you imagine had he actually not made it out of that alive, where we would be at as a country, right? Like, I feel like we witnessed some sort of like Nexus event or something where had option A happened, something crazy would have happened. Had option B happened, which option B did happen, something crazy also would have happened, right? Option A was Donald Trump gets shot, doesn't make it out of it, and what happens to our country? We have no idea what would have happened, right? Because it didn't happen, right? Option B did happen. He made it out of it alive, and he went on to win the presidential election, which we're all very happy and grateful for, right? We all came together as a country and realized that we want to elect someone not crazy, right? Not crazy. Not someone who can actually keep us out of a war. So here we are in square one, right back again. And if we don't lower the temperature, things like this are going to keep happening. Because the left has a permission structure set up that allows for this to go on, right? What's the permission structure, you might say? Well, the permission structure is seeing that if you commit violence and it is against the conservatives, it's okay. That's the permission structure. We just saw it at this high school where this guy gets socked in the gut and nobody did anything. Nobody did anything other than the adults in the room. The adults in the room rightly were like, this is crazy. You are allowed to stand here. They are allowed to stand here, right? No punching each other, right? No punches. That's insane, right? So thank God for the adults in the room that day, but we need more adults in the room, right? Because in all these other cases, it's also adults doing these things, right? And who's going to parent the adults? No one, right? So that kind of brings to a conclusion this segment of the show about political violence in America. It's everywhere, right? And we're only going to see more of it as long as the media continues to perpetuate this permission structure, does not cover these stories, and does not say that people need to be held accountable for things when they commit crimes, right? And saying that we need to help people who have mental illness get the help that they need. I hope that one day we can look back on this and say, wow, this was a really, really crazy time for America. Thank goodness for X, Y, and Z thing that happened. But I'm not sure if we will. Right now, it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like anything is going to change for the foreseeable future. And that is why I want to keep seeing conservatives get elected, because we need to have a good period of time where these people do not have power, that we can finally kind of root out some of this corruption and evil within our government, within our political systems, that hopefully we can actually bring down the temperature a little bit. But it's not going to happen until the left realizes that we're not the enemy here, that they have been choosing the 20 on the 80-20 issues every single time for like the past 10 years at this point. That is what is bringing the temperature up. So they're taking these extreme viewpoints and they're being so against anything reasonable in America. It's insane. It blows my mind. And I could talk about it all day, but we're already 35 minutes in and we have to talk about some other things. So let's get into it. All right. So our very next story that we've got comes from Harvard University. So Harvard is back in the news. So the Trump administration ups the ante after Harvard tries to play DEI hardball. So if you didn't remember, Harvard University has been the main subject of a lot of controversy over the past few years, from their Students for Fair Admissions case, which was showing that they were admitting Black and Hispanic students with much lower SAT scores over white and Asian students who had much higher SAT scores, right? And that case was a really great ruling because it showed that this was not a white issue. It was actually brought by Asian students, because the Asian students were in the short end of the stick getting admitted into Harvard. They had to get the highest SAT scores available to get into this university, right? They had to be so high, right, that Harvard was accepting people so much lower than them, right? They had to get even higher scores than even white people getting the Harvard was, which is like, first off, unheard of, right? We always think of white people getting the short end of the stick and things like this, but it was actually the Asians who were. So anyway, so that kind of brings us to Trump getting elected. Trump says, hey, you got to end the DEI stuff. We know you're still doing it. We know you're not really following this ruling and you're trying to skirt around the law a little bit. But if you don't clean things up, we're not going to give you funding. So now here we are in February 2026, a year after all this was happening in the first place. And we're back with an update. So the Department of Justice filed a federal lawsuit against Harvard University on Friday, alleging the Ivy League institution has unlawfully withheld admissions data required for a federal compliance review. The lawsuit marks a significant escalation in the government's effort to monitor university admissions following the Supreme Court's 2023 landmark ruling in the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, which effectively ended race-conscious admissions. The civil action filed by the DOJ's Civil Rights Division does not formally accuse Harvard of active racial discrimination. Instead, it seeks to compel the university to produce individualized applicant data, admissions policies, and internal correspondence related to race, ethnicity, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DI as I like to call it, initiatives. Quote, Harvard has failed to disclose the data we need to ensure that its admissions are fair and free of discrimination, said Attorney General Pam Bondi. We will continue fighting to put merit over DEI across America. The dispute tracks back to April 2025 when the DOJ initiated compliance reviews of Harvard's undergraduate college, law school, and medical school. The department requested 5 years of applicant-level data, including test scores, SAT, ACT, MCAT, and LSAT, GPAs, extracurriculars, and essays, disaggregated by race and ethnicity. Federal officials say this level of detail is necessary to determine if the university is circumventing the Supreme Court's mandate by using race-neutral proxies to achieve the same racial balancing. The court previously deemed unconstitutional. According to the complaint, Harvard has slow-walked the process for over 10 months, while the university has produced over 2,000 pages of documents. The DOJ characterizes most of these as publicly available materials such as financial aid, brochures, and aggregated statistics. The government alleges that Harvard has repeatedly missed extended deadlines, with the last meaningful production occurring in May 2025. Quote, if Harvard has stopped discriminating, it should happily share the data necessary to prove it, said Assistant Attorney General Hermie Dillon. Of course it should. Of course it should. The lawsuit highlights the unique position of Harvard as the world's wealthiest university, boasting a $56.9 billion endowment. Despite its vast private resources and the university remains subject to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act because it receives significant federal funding. In 2024 alone, Harvard received $686 million in federal research grants, and DOJ notes that the university is currently slated to receive over $2.6 billion in total federal assistance under federal law. Recipients of such funds must allow the DOJ to examine records to ensure compliance with anti-discrimination statutes. Of course it should. Harvard has a $56.9 billion endowment. By the way, their operating expenses are only about $6.8 billion. They have more than enough money to be covering all of their university activities all on their own. So I'm not a complete curmudgeon here. I don't mind the federal government handing out aid to universities if it's going towards research, particularly medical and STEM research, and things that are advancing the scientific fields of our country, right? It betters off everyone that way when we can do things like that, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be giving Harvard any money at all. However, this is another example of the left taking the absolutely insane view of the 20% of people who think that there should be race-based discrimination. By the way, if you believe there should be race-based discrimination, you're in the same group of people who are pro-racism, right? It's not. There's no such thing as reverse racism here. That's just racism. Right? You can't just discriminate on people because of their skin color. That's not fair. The whole reason why we have test scores in the first place is so that we don't need to discriminate against people, right? We can very easily see that when 10,000 high school students go in and take the SAT, they're all taking the exact same test. It's standardized across the board. It's been written by professional test makers, that their scores out of it are going to be reflective of how they are the student, right? And of course, standardized tests are not intelligence tests. It doesn't show how smart you are, right? It just shows how logical of a thinker you are. That's what you have to do. You have to logic out all the problems on the SAT. You can't just solve it. You don't have enough time to actually solve every single problem. You have to logic the problems out, right? So these standardized scores really show how logical thinkers the student base is, right? And colleges, generally you want to have the most logical people going into higher education. That's why the universities rely on the test scores. If you're just going to throw that out the window and accept students based on their skin color, why the heck are all these students going and studying for standardized tests in the first place? Great question, right? Great question. We're just going to throw it out the window. Now, test scores do have a lot to do with the amount of aid that you're eligible for, but you're taking away an opportunity from someone who knows more than you, is a better student than you, right? Is higher up than you are. And as far as I'm concerned, if Harvard wants to promote itself as being this top tier university worldwide, they should only accept the top tier people. I'm not a top tier student. I'm not a student that would go to Harvard. I am not a Harvard level individual, right? I accept that. I don't go to Harvard. I go to another university that is still a very good university for what it's worth, because I know what I want, right? I was never going to go to Harvard. I don't want to pay Harvard prices. I don't want to deal with Harvard BS. I never want to go to a place like Harvard. However, there's plenty of people who do have the money for that. There's plenty of people who do, have the test scores to do it, and they should have those spots open to them. Harvard should be taking the top level students. Every university should be taking the top down, right? If you have a student who has a higher test score, better grades in high school, all of this, right, than another student, that's who should be accepted over, or not. It doesn't have to do with if they're male or female, they're black or white, right? Their age, their sex, their ethnicity, their sexuality, any of it, right? Doesn't matter. It's all academics. These are academic institutions at the end of the day. They're not social institutions that are concerned with, making sure that everyone's treated equally. No, these are academic institutions. Academics are a very rigorous, thing that separates people out by the amount of work they're willing to do. If you get an A on your paper and another guy gets a C, you did more on it. You spent more time on it. You understood the material better, right? Simple as that. This is how grades work. This should be how college admissions work. So I totally agree with, was it Hermie Dillon saying that they should be happy to show this information if they're actually not doing these things. They should be happy to show this. They absolutely should. And by the way, Harvard is made up of what? Like 98% libs? The left should also be flipping out about this, because here's the thing. If they're so pro-academia and so pro-research and having federal money to help promote these activities, they should be the front runners saying, absolutely, Harvard needs to follow the laws. And listen to this, because we're putting money at risk for research, for getting students into the university, for all of this, right? The left should be the biggest proponent of saying, let's follow the law here, right? Because they're supposed to be the ones who are so pro-science, so pro-academia, so pro-research, right? They want to see all this research coming out of Harvard benefiting the greater America and the greater world as it is, to make our entire world a better place. They should be the first people saying that we need to follow the laws so that doesn't get messed with, right? I want Harvard to follow the laws. I want them to get their money. So Harvard has turned out a lot of really good research, right? I mean, I think that we can all agree that Harvard as an institution has been a net positive for the world, right? These big universities that turn out, I mean, universities as a whole, I think they, all of them, turn out a lot of research every year. I think that we can say they're a net positive to the world, that we have things. Now, I have a list off the top of my head of things that have been turned out of universities that have improved people's lives, but it's happening all the time, right? So it disappoints me as someone who's in the university system to see the complete lack of respect for students from these colleges and these universities. And I want people treated fairly. I do. So we will see what happens with this. And I suspect that Harvard is still up to discrimination. I mean, we saw that after that case happened, there were all of these agencies. I mean, we saw this when Trump got reelected. There were all these agencies who were changing around the names of their departments so they weren't like diversity, equity, inclusion departments anymore. They were like student access departments, right? Student well-being departments, but they were still doing the same thing. They just changed the name of it, right? I'm sure it's still happening at Harvard. I'd be surprised if it's not. But folks, that is all we have for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We spent a lot of time on like two subjects in this episode, but I felt like they needed to be brought up and talked about. And hopefully we have some more things to show you all next week. I get on and I look for news stories that I feel like are relevant to be bringing to you. And what I felt like was most relevant to be showing you today was the craziness of the left, what these people are dealing with in this world, and the fact that nothing's changing, right? I mean, even with this Harvard story, this case was ruled on, gosh, it seems like, what, was it back in like 2023 maybe that this was ruled on? So over 3 years ago now, maybe two and a half to 3 years ago now, that this case was ruled on by the Supreme Court. And still, what has changed? What has changed, right? Harvard was the main agitator of this. Harvard was the one who was being brought in front of the Supreme Court because of this, and they haven't even changed, right? They were the ones who were the subject of an entire Supreme Court ruling, and they still haven't changed. A lot of the other universities out there have, right? A lot of the smaller universities have. Not Harvard, though. Nothing's changed, right? We have the insanity of the left, where they're going and burning buildings, they're going and punching high school students. They're standing up for mental illness, and they're going and protesting inside churches. Donald Trump was shot. Charlie Kirk was shot. What's changed? what has honestly changed? I know I feel like this episode is a little bit of downer, honestly. It might feel that way, but I feel like it's a little bit of a downer, honestly. I've had kind of a downer week when it's come to the news cycle, honestly. And it does feel like nothing's changed, and at least with these things. And it's sad to see, because we have had a lot of positive changes happen. We've had so much. I mean, on our last week episode, we covered the nationwide school choice program going into place. That's positive change that happened, right? I mean, we've covered corruption being rooted out. That's positive change that's happened. I mean, we covered how, the Minnesota quality learning centers were exposed for embezzling all this money, and now they're being held responsible for this, and hopefully there is some convictions that come of this. That's a positive change that happened, right? We're seeing that. But in the things that are actually killing people, political violence, for one, where's the change at? We haven't seen it. This is honestly one of the biggest issues in our country right now, is just the amount of violence that we're seeing amongst our citizens, and we're not seeing any change from it. So, think about that, and we'll see you all back here next week. It's definitely going to be something I'm going to be stewing on for a little bit and thinking about. Why isn't it that we haven't seen the change? Is it possibly because, the media gets a lot of attention when there's no change? I mean, I would almost say that it's not necessarily that, because a lot of this violence we're seeing isn't even being covered by the media. It's being shoved under the carpet. So why is it? Tweet at me. Tell me what are your theories for why political violence is being perpetuated in America. Like, why haven't we seen a change? After we've seen several political leaders at this point get shot, one of them get killed, high school students getting punched, why haven't we seen change? Why isn't there a nationwide outcry for change when it comes to lowering the temperature and ending political violence in America? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. So with that, make sure to follow me on all the social media platforms. They're scrolling across the bottom of the screen. This show goes on YouTube, Rumble, and X every single Friday at 6 p.m. You're watching it right now, whatever platform that is. If you ever want to go back and watch previous episodes, they're all up on YouTube. They're all up on Rumble. You can watch all of them there. Make sure you leave a like on this stream. Share with friends. Let people know how great this show is. It always helps every single viewer. We get more and more attention on these shows. And, yeah. If you have suggestions of what we should be covering next week, anything you want to hear me talk about, you can send me a DM on Twitter. You can tweet at me as well. If there's anything that you like about the show, you don't like the show, let me know also. All right, I'm always open to suggestions. So I do this show for you all. I mean, I love talking about the news. I love getting into what's happening in America. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the ones who are watching it. So I want to make sure it's a good, positive experience for you all. So hoping to show more videos, right? This is kind of a test run today of showing some videos. I'd like to show some more videos. Like, they'd be interesting to have on the show. But with that, I've been Nathan Hale. This has been the Nathan Hale Show. We will see you again next week. Have a great Valentine's Day. Go get some flowers for someone special out there. Even if it's some random person, go give them a flower. It'll be a nice thing to do. But with that, I'll see you all next week. Peace out. Bye.